Up next, we have our next session, that is Shark Tank and Winning Middle India. We shall now learn about how or what can make or break startups. And to moderate this session, we have Swati Jena, the founder of WriteFor, author of the Entrepreneur Soulbook, co-author of Diversity Beyond Tokenism.
Okay, let me start with a question. How many here are either practicing entrepreneurs or you think in the next 5 years you might look at entrepreneurship? Well, in India, we say now that the age of entrepreneurs has come, and either one of us will be entrepreneurs or we will know an entrepreneur. And in that context, this discussion, we have two very interesting and relevant books and two even more interesting authors. First up is the author of the official book of Shark Tank India, Prerna Lidhoo. And Prerna has been a business journalist for the last almost a decade. And this is her first book, but interviewing business leaders, writing about them is not new. And when she's not writing, she's a self-confessed. Welcome, Prerna. And there's an interesting diversity here on stage. While this is Prerna's first book, our next guest is on his 8th book. T.N. Hari, and I keep telling him, Hari, I'm losing count of your books. A very well-known business author, prolific business author, an angel investor himself, worked with several startups, helped them scale. And now he is an entrepreneur and working on his organization, Artha School of Entrepreneurship. I don't think I can fit his resume into one introduction. Welcome, Hari. So my first question for you, Prerna, is how did you end up writing the official book of Shark Tank India? And how is this, how was experience different from journalistic writing?
First of all, thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure to be in Bengaluru and also a relief from the cold winds of Bombay. So yeah. So yeah, to your question, I would think that journalistic writing is all about, first of all, when we approach entrepreneurs and CEOs as journalists, they're sort of intimidated and they're like, they put their guards up and they know what to say and they know what not to say. So that inhibition sort of is what I felt. But when I interviewed these people as an author for the first time, I felt that they let me into their lives, both professional and sometimes personal. So that was really good. That was really enriching and very different from, and some of them knew me from before as a journalist, so they could not identify what hat am I wearing. I kept telling them, forget that I'm a journalist, forget that. So that is very different. When it comes to writing, once you're working on a magazine or a digital story, you're done with the story and you move forward with it. It's like watching a movie versus binging on a series. So, but with a book, it's so different. It's such an immersive process. It doesn't leave you for months. You keep thinking about it. Oh, it can be edited again. It can be, once a story on a magazine or a digital portal or a newspaper is out, it's out and you're on with your next story. So that, I think I found that was the main difference in terms of approaching as a writer, and even the person I'm interviewing, the way they look at me when, the two hats
How did you
change.
end up writing the official book of Shark Tank India?
Yeah, so they were looking, it was a very interesting story. While I was moving to Mumbai last year, the Shark Tank India, Sony and Juggernaut, the publisher, was looking for someone who is experienced in business journalism and is based out of Bombay. So I guess fit the bill. And and also I've watched the first season, so they knew that I have an interest in entrepreneurship. I cover startups. So I think I was ticking all the right boxes. So that was really great. And once I got into that world, it was really interesting because I was there on the set and I could see all the action happening behind the scenes. So that was really interesting for me, and that really helped the book.
And we'll get to that action that you have witnessed very shortly. We are not letting you off the hook so soon. Hari, this is your 8th book. So how is it writing your 8th book different from, let's say, your first or second book? Just if you could speak to your journey, and how did Winning Middle India sort of come about?
Yeah, so I think, I write extensively and writing is almost my second nature. It comes to me pretty easily. And once in a while, an article-worthy idea takes shape in my mind. And then I write an article. It could be in any publication, a Mint or any other place. And then once in a while, a book-worthy idea begins to take shape. So I never, think that I should be writing a book, but then when I observe the world around me, some patterns begin to take shape, some dots get connected. And that's when I begin to think, probably there is a book idea in this. And all of these books, were about some patterns taking shape, some dots getting connected. Middle India was, clearly my co-author and I, as we, spoke multiple times, we realized that India is going through massive change. And, and that change is very visible in India, films and cricket have reflected or mirrored society. If you just look at IPL, for example, right, you find a lot of players, not from tier 1 cities, but from tier 3, tier 4 towns of India, don't speak English, speak the regional language, very confident in their own skin. And that's true for entrepreneurs also, coming from tier 3, tier 4. Suddenly there is a confidence that, we belong to India, we are the right place, right time, we can solve problems. So that confidence, I suddenly realized that there is a book-worthy idea in this. And what are the things that have happened in the recent past that led to some of these, the confidence building? For example, Aadhaar, UPI, all of those suddenly began taking shape. I think India as a nation removed a lot of friction that was coming in the way of building good enterprises. And removing friction once in a while, I think we've done that very well. So I thought, we are at a stage where, we are ready to launch in some ways, and it's worth writing a book about that.
And it's interesting, like both these books where Winning Middle India talks about how do you create solutions for the next 500 million customers in India who may not be affluent, but they are not poor. They have spending power, but they need unique solutions. And many of those entrepreneurs came on Shark Tank India, as we saw. And Prerna, when I was talking to her, she shared that what we see on YouTube or on TV is maybe a 10, 15-minute pitch, but the actual pitch is an hour or 2 hour long, right? Prerna, if you could share what kind of preparation the entrepreneurs had to do and how I believe Sony helped them prepare for all these pitches, if you could share a little bit about that.
So they had an entire team of financial advisors and venture capitalists and experts in the industry who would interview these people. And obviously it's a TV show. It's made for an India to educate people about entrepreneurship. And, a show like that was the first in India. And it was like a dinner table conversation suddenly, which was like a never seen before event. So they had to understand what India they are targeting, which is why the sharks had to be first of all trained to speak in Hindi, which was again a big first. Anupam Mittal, I remember Anupam Mittal telling me that I didn't know that I could speak Hindi so well because this is the first time he has done it publicly. So those kind of things, they had to be TV trained. When it comes to the contestants, they would also prepare for pitches, mock tests, mock interviews. Even for the sharks, when they were being auditioned for the role of the sharks, they had mock people coming in and pitching to them. So all those preparations went behind the show, and that was also a very tedious process before pre-prep. And when it comes to the contestants, they were sort of trained in the way, what are the questions you're going to, potential questions, these are the things that you should be trained in. So that entire rigorous process, and the kudos to Sony India's team behind, which have sort of obviously taken inspiration from Shark Tank US, but sort of taken it a notch further. One of the very key differences between the US version and Indian is that we had certain explainers, like what is gross capital income, what is profit, little explainers that we had in the middle of the show, which was absent in the US version. That's because, first of all, it was important for Indian audiences to understand these terms. Only then they'll enjoy a show like this. So I think they've done a very good job in at least building that kind of awareness in the middle India in that sense, and educating them very well about entrepreneurship.
I think that was one of the great value adds and probably why people got drawn to the show, apart from the excitement of entrepreneurship. If we can't cover, there are a lot of stories that Prerna shared with me behind the scenes. So if it doesn't come out in Q&A, you should catch hold of her because there were a lot of breakdowns as well, Prerna, that Prerna shared. So hopefully if that comes out through Q&A or, that's a question for you during the networking session. Hari, to bring you in here, in Winning Middle India, you have mentioned in one of your chapters about the next 500 million customers, a unique characteristic is that they might neither be like a high margin, low volume customer segment or maybe a low margin, high volume. You could have several niches which are low volume and low margin, right? And probably this is where the grassroots entrepreneurs who understand the localized needs come in to the picture. So while now India has begun to understand entrepreneurship, we also have a very stereotypical understanding of scale. It is become a unicorn, go to an IPO stage, etc. So given this context of, winning middle India, the grassroots entrepreneurs, should we start broadening our definition of scale? Should we start looking at scale in different ways?
Yeah, I think absolutely. We should look at scale. Scale is a very nuanced thing. So there's no one way of looking at it. And I think the way we look at scale is when we look at a startup, we think of a startup that is VC funded and is doing some kind of disruption. And what do I mean by disruption? I mean it is solving an existing problem in such an interesting way that people would never use the existing solution. They are going to migrate large scale to the new solution. But I don't think many startups in India need to be VC funded at all in the first place, and they may not be disruptive in nature. They can just be small businesses, profitable businesses. In my view, India is putting out 12 million youngsters every day into the job market, and these large unicorns are not going to be able to give jobs. What will eventually create jobs, 12 million jobs, is going to be much smaller startups. There could be an achar making, startup in Meghalaya, for example. So you'll have many of these smaller enterprises which can be run profitably. And I think, not many problems are also amenable to be solved in a hyperscale mode. For example, the transport problem in urban India was beautifully amenable to, scaling because the existing solution was very bad and the new solution, which a platform like an Ola or Uber created, was an awesome platform, and those platforms can never be disintermediated. For the simple reason you can't find a taxi without a platform, and a driver can't find you without the platform. The platform is disintermediable, and you can build a large company around it. But those problems where you can build these hyper-scalable companies in India are going to be limited. India's problems will have to be solved in a very disaggregated, decentralized way because the customers are also segmented that way. Even though you might have 400, 500 million in India consumers, in a manner of speaking, this is quite schizophrenic because the entire consumer community is divided by geography, by income, by demography, by tastes, by different degrees of economic development in different parts of the country. So it's not possible to just build one product and say we will build a large company out of it. You have to build smaller companies first by segmenting your customers appropriately, and that's the way India's new age economy is going to take shape.
And I'm so glad we are having this conversation, and there are so many aspiring entrepreneurs in the audience, and it's very important that we start looking at startups differently because somewhere there's just one stereotype of what is a successful or scaled startup. Prerna, you interviewed all the sharks, and as those of us who were watching it on TV or social media, clearly each shark has a different style or what they look for in investment, and Aman is very different from Piyush Bansal, right? But if you could identify one or two characteristics that all sharks looked for in entrepreneurs in common, what would that be?
Sure. Yeah, you're right in saying that Piyush Bansal is very different from, say, an Namita Thapar. She will obviously bet on startups that have achieved a particular scale. While Piyush Bansal is more risk-taking, like he placed in his bets on Jugaadu Kamlesh, which nobody invested on at that point, and that was like a very emotional moment for the entire nation. So yeah, they're very different investment styles. But one string of thought that almost all of them have given me was that they bet on the entrepreneur and not not on the business. So the business can pivot, the business can change, the business can have its own characteristics depending on the time, depending on so many different, for a business to be successful, for a business to fail, there are like 100 different reasons, but that's what like I've gathered, that for it to be successful, it just needs that one right time, right place kind of a thing. So yeah, one thing that all of them bet on is the entrepreneur, the grit of the entrepreneur, whether the entrepreneur is willing to pivot at the right time, whether that entrepreneur is like so attached to its idea, like that idea cannot be bigger than himself. And even that person, if he's collaborative, a lot of time investors have this problem that, and entrepreneurs also have this problem that investors are sort of putting their noses in too much, they're dictating too much, which is why some of the times things fall out. So I think that again is a very important thing, that how collaborative are the entrepreneurs, how it's almost always on the entrepreneur. The bet is almost always on the entrepreneurs. Yeah.
Yeah, and in the book, in fact, like across the chapters, there are a lot of insights on what are the other traits of an entrepreneur the sharks looked at. The point on attachment, the entrepreneur getting too attached to the product reminds me of the very first article I'd ever written on LinkedIn, where I said, flirt with the product idea, don't fall in love. Okay, so we spoke of the entrepreneur. Hari, I want to have a little discussion on the investor maturity, right? So just like there are more entrepreneurs coming in, there are more investors entering the market. At an individual level, these could be entrepreneur investors like the sharks. It could be people with money but no business background, and there could be new institutional investors also. So if you could speak to the maturity of the investor ecosystem at this point in time. And the second part of the question is, what qualities will investors need to have, mature investors need to have, to support these grassroots entrepreneurs, like for those of who might need capital?
So I think, investors are also evolving. They're learning along the way. They are figuring out what ideas, will scale and grow, what ideas will not work out. Many investors made mistakes, and typically venture capitalists in India, worldwide, have demonstrated some degree of herd mentality, which is go after a particular idea, wholesale. All of them, one invest, everybody goes after that particular idea. And sometimes, many of those have not worked out. For example, if you take companies like Byju's, if you take several other companies, built businesses up, scale them, but, were actually hollow in terms of governance. Investors were probably aware of this. They did nothing about it. So investors are also learning along the way. They make mistakes. And I think, as we go ahead and we build this, entrepreneurship for Bharat, you will find entrepreneurs coming from tier 3, tier 4 towns who have been close to those problems. As a founder, it's very difficult to solve a problem if you've not deeply experienced it. So if a founder, for example, has lived in a small town in Kodad in Suryapet district in Andhra Pradesh, will figure out what is the problem there. And an investor who's grown up in Rafiganj, like a Pratik Jain or Fundamentum, seen the middle India, will probably fund, this guy, Jani in Kodad. So I would say, gradually, investors are also coming from tier 3, tier 4 towns. They've also begun to experience those. And as they experience those, they figure out what are profitable businesses. And gradually, I think I also feel, there are many problems that are just not VC fundable. They're not just going to be attractive for venture capitalists. Because venture capital will go after problems that can scale very rapidly. They are not going to go after problems that are just profitable, where you can build a small company and run it profitably. So I think capital also will have to evolve. So for currently you have risk capital, which is venture capital at one extreme, and you have debt, which is zero risk. But I think you will need capital in between, which will fund profitable enterprises through equity. So I think capital also is evolving, venture capital is evolving in many ways. So I think that's also, along with the ecosystem, along with the nature of the business problems, founders, they're also evolving and becoming more mature.
And I think this will be an interesting space to watch, as startups evolve, entrepreneurs evolve, and how even investors evolve alongside. All right, now as we're inching close to the audience Q&A, I want to have a little fun with the authors, and I have a quiz for them, not so rapid fire quiz. Okay, so I'm going to take turns to ask. So one of you gets the question first, so the other person has a little more time to think. All right, so Prerna, if you had to trade 6 months of writer's block, like really bad writer's block, to escape 6 months of Mumbai traffic. Will you make that trade?
Definitely, because I know writer's block will eventually get over.
Okay. I am tempted to add a twist to it. What if you get your next book offer in that writer's block
Oh my
phase?
God.
All right, Hari, you had more time to think. What is
Same
your
answer.
thought?
Exactly the same.
Okay. Okay. I hope that writers would be less willing to trade with writer's block, but okay, I stand corrected.
Now you know how bad the traffic is.
Yeah. All right, next one. So if, let's say your book, now ChatGPT is the discussion that writers have, right? So if ChatGPT was writing Shark Tank India's official book versus Prerna Lidhoo writing it, what's something ChatGPT would never be able to do that you would?
I guess emotions, because ChatGPT will never ask Vinita saying, you know, why do you advocate crying is okay at a workplace? Or when Anupam Mittal said that, I had a panic works very well for me in terms of, he talked about his mental health, he talked about his panic attacks. So that was like a huge revelation. So I don't think ChatGPT is there yet when it comes to, although it has written poems and it has written letters, love letters and whatnot. So it's reaching there. But I think emotional intelligence is still something that I don't think ChatGPT would be able to ask for.
And Hari, ChatGPT writing winning middle India.
Yeah, so ChatGPT, I think, is a good tool for enhancing productivity and efficiency, but it can never write a book. It will just hallucinate, because ultimately what it does is picks up information from the internet, and ChatGPT is a compression algorithm, which is that, you know, a large amount of information is compressed into a very small amount, and if it begins to interpolate what is not there. So there's no way you can write any book of any kind, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay, I'm happy to hear that as a writer. Hari, you get the next question first. If there was a person, a business person from present or past, you would like to write an autobiography on, who would that be?
So, you know, I am fascinated by people who work under the radar, who work very quietly, do amazing work, and stay out of limelight consciously. So one such person whom I really admire, he's right up there for me, is V.S. Sudhakar, one of the co-founders at Big Basket. Nobody knows him, the media doesn't know him, he's never there in the limelight, but he is the heart and soul of that great company that was built. So he's the one person I would write about.
Okay. Prerna?
Yeah, so because the Jawan fever has sort of gripped the nation, I would, like, enough, we know about the actor SRK a lot, but I would want to know about the marketeer, the brain behind that brand. So I would, I think, write a book on brand SRK, and I really want to understand how he does it, because it's sort of fascinating the way he thinks and what is the team behind it, what is the strategy. So I think more of the technical stuff in terms of how he's run his empire. What is that charm that, I don't know how many SRK fans in the house.
An empire it is, yeah. That'll be an interesting book.
As a marketer, yeah.
Read. All right, so that ends the grilling from me, and time for audience questions.
My question is for Mr. Hari. So the conversation today is centered around grassroots innovators creating solutions, local solutions. So what it took large companies, family businesses to look at bottom of the pyramid, why they didn't look at it as a potential market?
Yeah, so, you know, C.K. Prahlad has written a book called Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid. So I think it's an idealistic kind of a book. It's not very easy to build businesses that can be profitable by selling at the bottom of the pyramid. The bottom of the pyramid just doesn't have money. So I think it's just a wild dream, you know, making money by selling to the bottom of the pyramid. I think the middle of the pyramid, there is an opportunity. And some smart industrialists, some smart business heads in the past have tried to do this. One example is a person called Chinni Krishnan. Chinni Krishnan grew up in a small town in Kadlur in Tamil Nadu. And he worked with agricultural labor, industrial labor, and figured out that they have high aspirations, but they don't just have cash flows. They live from hand to mouth. So they can't buy a 500 ml shampoo bottle. They just don't have the money. But they would be excited to buy a 5 ml shampoo sachet, which they can use on special occasions. So he realized this and created those sachets. To me, that's an amazing innovation. And, you know, all the multinationals which had ignored the customers at the middle of the pyramid adopted this, and today more shampoo is sold via sachets than, you know, via larger pack sizes. So I think smarter, you know, entrepreneurs are figuring out that there is some money to be made, but the reality is that, you know, incremental, you know, marginal utility of a premium product is much higher than the incremental cost needed to build that product, as a result of which it's easier to build and make money by selling products to at the high end of the pyramid. But middle end, it's an extremely difficult ask because their expectations of the product are different, their price points expectations are different. But I think, with breakthroughs in, technology where you can evaluate customers provided loans, you can increase financial inclusion, and that's how fintech companies are coming up. So ability to distribute products at low cost, technology which enables low cost customer acquisition and distribution will help innovate and solve problems for middle India.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Ma'am, writing about Shark Tank and entrepreneurs, I want to ask, what are some patterns you observed in some successful entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs who scaled revenue and who came in Shark Tank and they scaled their revenue and their sales? What are some traits of successful entrepreneurs you observed while writing the book?
Yeah, as I already mentioned, one is grit, that you have to keep at it. It's a tough journey. Which is why 90% of the startups fail at every stage. And I think that is extremely important, to be at it and, pivoting at the right time. That, again, we've seen in so many businesses. All the sharks, if you notice their journeys, the business that they're running, the business that gave them what they are today, made them what they are today, that's not their first business. With Sugar Cosmetics, it was a different business, a B2B business that she got into first. And that likewise with Piyush Bansal, who was into a transport business, and there so many business that they experimented with in the US, then he came here and then sort of experimented. So I think just being at it is sort of a very important, even the contestants that I interviewed, they gave me a similar insight. Like, for example, a brand it's a B2B brand, Yan Bazaar, which got a lot of funding on the show, and it's sponsoring events now. It's become really big. How many people know the names of B2B brands? So I think that, and that person told me that, he would wear the shirt of his brand and travel in the local train so that people strike up a conversation with him. And, he would, to every party he would go, he would wear a black shirt with his branding. So these are innovative ideas, innovative ways in which people know how to, promote their brand. And sort of this is how, like we say in India, it's called jugaad. So you be it any way, people will just go there and be at it and just make sure that their business is successful and known by most people. So I think, yeah, it's the most common factor for all entrepreneurs has to be just be at it. And also, by the way, to know when to quit. Like, we also saw the flat hats example, where on live television, a person left his business, cried. All the entrepreneurs, the set on the scene was really somber that day, because all the entrepreneurs could see that, we've once in our lifetime been through this journey. So everyone on the set, even the production team, started crying. That was because, it was such an emotional moment, someone leaving their business on live television. So I think, yeah, it's about when to not stop and when to stop. I would summarize it in that way.
Ma'am, on your left.
Yeah. Sorry.
So the number of entrepreneurs in India have grown by a huge number in recent times, and we have seen innovations, and everyone is trying to create a differentiator for their product these days. In this process, some people are trying to solve the problems which actually do not exist in the world. So what would you give as an advice to us, that how should we not mix our passion, wild passion, and how to be more practical with our products and our ambitions?
Sure. I think I always ask CEOs and people I interview that whether there is a conundrum, right? The customer knows what it wants, and they always say follow the customer. But the customer does not always know what it wants. Like, for example, we didn't know we needed an iPhone or a Netflix or an Uber. These are new innovations, or a WhatsApp, which has sort of taken over, UPI, like he mentioned. So I think, like you said, that we never know what problem has already existed. Even the customer doesn't know that this was a problem or this. And today, it's not even about the problem. Those are the basic startups, like startups that go about problem solving. Today, it's the age of convenience. And we are obviously paying through a lot of things, be it data, money, dunzo. What is it? It is like, we used to go there and take a rickshaw and whatever, get the money back. It's all about convenience now. So can we say that the pursuit of seeking convenience did not exist? I think that is a good enough problem. So it's all about identifying whether there is an enough mass for that, or whether you can create a mass which will be used to something like this. This is exactly how innovations happen, and we move on to the new technology, and we get used to the new technology. Like, I don't remember the last time I went to, I know it sounds like very privileged, and I don't remember the last time I went to a grocery store for groceries. I'm so used to it because there's no time, and so that has sort of, that behavioral change has already happened for me, and I'm sure for a lot of Indians, which is why these companies are still running. So I think identifying that problem, it doesn't have to be like an active problem today. It can also be about behavior change in the future, like EVs. People were fine with petrol vehicles and diesel vehicles, not so much diesel obviously because it's more environmentally damaging, but getting to EVs is a big behavioral change. So would you say that you're solving a problem? Yeah, because there are so many things that you can work around it. So yeah, it's all about identifying the right thing and waiting for the right time for the market to be up to take that change.
I'll take the liberty of adding to your question. And it'll be good to get Hari's inputs here as well, because Hari, you've been meeting a lot of entrepreneurs around the country. If you could speak to this question, and also, one, how do you know, or when do you know that you're trying to solve a problem that doesn't need to be solved? Also, when you're trying to solve a problem ahead of its time.
So I sit on the investor side also often, and one thing I try and determine very early on is, are you solving a real problem or are you solving a non-existent problem? That's the phrase that you used, because very important. Eventually, even convenience, for example, customers would love it, but can you as a business make money by providing that convenience? For example, if you provide convenience and you can't make money, you've not got your product market fit. To me, product market fit is all about consumer love coming to you at a price that makes you profitable. And one of the reasons why many of the startups don't seem to be working out is that they're not profitable. They're providing convenience, but the customers are not willing to pay enough to make you profitable. So that's a question that I quickly try and address in the very beginning. Is that a real problem, which is, can you make money out of it? Customer delight will come if you provide free services, discounted services. But the point is that, can you make money? So that's the first question I try and address always, and get a deep understanding to that question.
And also the timeline. How much time would you take to become profitable? Because obviously we know so many businesses that are running, that are successful, but Amazon didn't make money for 10, 15 years. So, all that. So what
Amazon,
is the timeline?
I think, is one of the only companies in the world that the investors will spare for some reasons, but very few companies in the world can afford that luxury, I think.
Yeah, so I'm sure as an investor, you have this mindset that how much time would you need to sort of get returns and stuff like that.
Happy afternoon to everyone. I have a question for you, ma'am. You have interviewed sharks. So from their perspective and opinions, do you think there will be a reduction in number of young entrepreneurs due to a high failure rate in businesses and sustainability?
I would think that high failure rate has always been there since the time India sort of warmed up to the startup ecosystem, and it's still not new. Of course, globally, if we compare to other markets, it is a new budding entrepreneurship ecosystem. But I do not think that if we look at the show, and one show it would only influence more and more people to try something like this, because I don't think the show promotes failure or startups not working in that sense. So I don't think that would promote in that sense.
Just wanted to add to this, I think this failure rate being very high is not necessarily true. It's very high only in the VC-funded startups. And there are very few VC-funded startups in India. As you go around, India comprises 6.5 to 7, crore small enterprises. All are running reasonably well. So I think this assumption that failure rate in startups is very high is completely wrong. You can build small and profitable businesses. You go around, you will find around you itself small and profitable businesses being built regularly. Failure rate is very low. That notion of failure rate being high is only in VC-funded startups which aspire to hyper scale.
I think I'm glad you said that, Hari. In fact, I would have asked an add-on question to that because that 10% startups succeed, that number has kind of stuck and we have not revisited it. So I think there needs to be a revision to that number or contextualizing that number a little more. Okay. So we can take one more question, I think.
Good evening, ma'am. I'm from NMIMS Bangalore, BBA UG student. So my question to you is that how can an entrepreneur be at it in the business, at the same time not get mentally attached, so that when the time comes to shut down the business, he is mentally ready for it?
So yeah, it's a very important to take care of your mental health and to take care of, to revisit at what stage do you, shut off and understand. That is really important. And, like we often talk about resistance in running a startup, it's often I think a lot more conversation needs to happen about when to stop, when to not push yourself, when to not make it very toxic. Because look at what we're seeing, so many suicides in Kota. It is a factor of people pushing themselves. There's nothing wrong with hustle, but there has to be a balance between that. So yeah, an entrepreneur really needs to have a very, very strong mental, physical, and even emotional well-being, and that is extremely important. So yeah, it's I think once you set out to enter entrepreneurship, become an entrepreneur, you have to mentally prepare yourself. This is an important aspect of my future from now on. So that's the only way they can do it.
And I'll quickly add that as a practicing entrepreneur, I think it's the ability to always play the devil's advocate to your own ideas. I think that's very important. I think that brings us to the close of this session. And I think if I have to sum up the moral of the story, it's good if you make it to Shark Tank as an entrepreneur, but it's perfectly fine if you don't, because that's not the measure of success, whether you got funded or not. Thank you very much. You've been a great audience.
Thank you.
I would like to thank our moderator, Swati, and our guest speakers, Prerna and Hari. This was a very engrossing and great session for all of us to learn from. I would like to call upon Mr. Rajiv Gupta to please hand over the tokens of appreciation. Please, again, could we have a round of applause?
Benedict, happy birthday. 9th September. 9th edition of Business Lit Fest.